even in the era of AI assistants, agents, and everything else, Clojure still give the biggest performance boost for me, especially for backend tasks.
I think the benefits of Clojure just being a very practical language and being able to leverage JVM libraries was extremely useful.
Have you connected to production using REPL?
I think partly the way to do it is you have to create the job yourself.
So was Clojure officially sanctioned when you started to build systems in it, or it was kind of operated a bit under the radar?
Oh yeah, that's a good question.
If you were tasked about building a new system today at the New York Times, would Clojure still be your first choice?
Super Bowl moments for us.
Hey everyone, welcome to the new episode of our podcast series, Clojure in Product. Would you do it again?
And this time, we're shifting our focus to explore how Clojure survives and thrives inside the large-scale companies. And our first guest is Jeremiah, who is a staff software engineer at the New York Times.
And Jeremiah has spent nearly a decade working on the New York Times search systems, building Clojure libraries for semantic search, entity recognition, and query rewriting that powers the core search experience across the whole platform.
Yeah, we'll talk about how Clojure found its place into 6,000-person organization, and what is it actually like to maintain critical Clojure systems in such a polyglot stack.
So let's begin. Map our questions and micro-expand them into real-life Clojure experience.
Hello, Jeremiah. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Hello.
Yeah. So Jeremiah, thanks for joining us on the podcast on the Clojure in Product, especially to tell us about the Clojure in the large organizations like New York Times. So I would like to start maybe from talking about your journey, your background, and if you could share how did you first get into the Clojure and what made it stick for you?
Sure. I was first exposed to Clojure during university. I had classes with Prolog and Common Lisp, and I thought those were a lot of fun. From there, I think I was just kind of learning more about Lisp and ran into Clojure that way. A lot of my other coursework was in Java, so being able to continue writing Lisp on the JVM was a huge appeal in school, and I just kept using it all through undergrad, through grad school, and in industry once I graduated.
Nice. And so you've been with Clojure since then, yes? Since that time?
Yeah, since 2011, I think.
Can you tell a bit more about how did you find a job in the Clojure? Because that's really interesting question usually for newcomers, especially how it's possible to find maybe Lisp or Clojure or anything else, any fancy technology.
Yeah, I think partly the way to do it is you have to create the job yourself. I was lucky that the manager who hired me was also a fan of Clojure, although we weren't using Clojure at the time. And when I joined the team, the services we had were in PHP, Erlang, Python, Java. So it was kind of an iterative process of consolidating all these systems into Java systems, and then from there, starting to make Clojure systems. And it wasn't exactly a fast journey, but worth it in the end because I get to write Clojure all day, every day.
So were you the person who introduced Clojure in the New York Times?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell a bit more of the process? So why you decided to use specifically Clojure? Why not other Lisps or maybe Common Lisp scheme? I don't know, Prolog you mentioned.
I think the benefits of Clojure just being a very practical language and being able to leverage JVM libraries was extremely useful. In a large enterprise, there's a lot of things the company pays for like Datadog or Sumo Logic, which, are paid services, and they have great first party Java libraries. So it's very easy to integrate into all these things. Had we chosen something like Common Lisp, I think it would have been significantly more effort on our end to just share telemetry with the rest of the services in our company.
Can you tell a bit more about the first task that you've solved in Clojure and how this journey of Clojure inside NYT started, actually?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. It's been a while now. So I'm pretty sure the way this happened was just kind of starting on the periphery, writing tests, not unit tests, but I think I was dabbling with like the property-based testing and using that to help a migration. So like we had the kind of schema contract for an API, and I'm just like, okay, let me turn that into Clojure spec, do property-based testing against that, and just kind of like generate thousands of combos, because this API had a lot of knobs. So just the sheer surface area of combinations was pretty high. Being able to generate, thousands of tests was useful for that, and surfaced a lot of bugs, which is great. But that kind of built some confidence, and then started writing some things that were very well suited to Clojure. So some data processing, Kafka to Kafka kind of data transform code. And then just it slowly took over the world on our team.
And can you tell how the Clojure is used now? So I'm curious, even the percentage of the code base. So how big the Clojure influence right now in New York Times?
So my team is the search team at the New York Times. So we build the search systems. We build the systems that let the other teams build search systems. There's a number of different searches at the New York Times. And then there's everything that sits behind that, which is all the kind of data oriented code of like something is published, we need to transform it into something that is indexed. A lot of steps happen in there, like denormalizing the data, putting denormalized data into Kafka so that we can index or re-index as fast as possible. So yeah, our code is, I don't know, it's kind of like sprawling. I think our team has like 40 or 60 repos, but that's just like historical cruft. We have a main repo now where we've consolidated all kind of the main stuff. And yeah, I don't know. It's not the biggest code base just because Clojure is so concise. Like that was the nice thing from migrating kind of these systems from Java to Clojure. We cut out so much of just the raw physical source files. Yeah.
All these Java beans with getters and setters. Yeah.
Yeah. All the Spring stuff.
Yeah, that's that. So it's kind of internal system for the New York Times. So it's kind of external facing to the customer.
But all of it. Yeah.
All of that.
So if you go and search on the New York Times, that's our system, Elasticsearch index. But then under the hood, like a lot of sections of the site are actually powered by search as well. So like if you visit politics, that stream of articles is a search query. The different tabs that are like the things recommended for you based on your interests are search under the hood. So Clojure is powering a lot of parts of the site under the hood.
I see. I can imagine this kind of tasks require some natural language processing or something like this, like collaborative searching, some machine learning algorithm. Do you implement all these things in Clojure, or do you connect to other kind of services, microservices, to do, for example, relative search of relative articles?
It's sort of a mix. We try to do a lot of stuff in process and embed it directly. So we have that for kind of entity detection, entity extraction code. Other stuff we try to push into the database layers. In this case, like Elasticsearch. We do all the like vector embeddings, that kind of like AI stuff you're seeing now. We push into Elasticsearch itself, and that's just for performance reasons.
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the next question, I'm really curious. So, was Clojure officially sanctioned when you started to build systems in it, or it was kind of operated a bit under the radar? And has internal status of Clojure changed over the time?
So yeah, to start, definitely more under the radar. Experimental hack projects. That kind of stuff is how it started. I think now it's definitely more usable, or like more blessed as a language. But it is still, the odd one out.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only non-imperative, non-place oriented language at the company.
But you've mentioned Erlang, that it was also used in the system.
Yeah.
Was it replaced or removed?
Yeah, that system was decommissioned. So when I joined the team, someone had written an Erlang load balancer, I guess prior to Elastic load balancing being a thing. So like an early days system. Yeah, but no, we don't need that anymore.
I see.
Unfortunately, yeah.
I see. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I actually was wondering, like looking back, what have been maybe some of the unexpected benefits, or maybe perhaps drawbacks of using Clojure at the NYT? Can you think of any?
Let's see, unexpected. So I guess maybe one thing that is perhaps unexpected is whenever like our company is moving to a new like paid provider of some service, like paid telemetry through Datadog or paid feature flags, that that kind of like service, I think we are the team that can typically do that the fastest, because I don't know, just the Clojure code is easy to iterate on, and there's always like a really good Java library that they provide. So pulling that in tends to be pretty quick. So it puts us more on the leading edge internally for like adopting new services.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And maybe some drawbacks?
I don't think there are any unexpected drawbacks. I think there's the things you might hear typically where the language is less common and less familiar to people. So that just kind of is scary. It can be scary to other engineers or to leadership. But so far, like, hiring hasn't been hard, and onboarding people to Clojure hasn't been hard. Now with AI stuff, I don't know. We'll see what it's like with onboarding, because people can be productive very fast without understanding it, using cursor and tools like that. It remains to be seen like what that will do to the mental model of learning to understand how Clojure, like the way to think in Clojure. So I don't know. I have no judgment on how that will work.
Yeah, that's interesting. I also noticed that AI decreased a lot the learning curve for the newcomers. And usually if people have experience with software engineering for 5 years, maybe in JavaScript or Java, for them, it's really easy to transfer to Clojure. So that's unexpected benefit of AI development. And
definitely.
You talk about the team, the onboarding, the hiring. Can you tell a bit more about your current role and the scope of responsibilities, so we will be able to ask you a bit more about your point of view, about management point of view of Clojure?
Sure. I'm currently a staff engineer at the New York Times, and so I'm not on the higher. I'm just purely on the technical side, and I'm like the technical lead for the search stuff at the New York Times.
And what is the size of your team?
I think now is, I don't know, we are moving around, so it's a little in flux, but I think we will be 5 at the end of all the moving around.
And what is the progress? So was the team been stable for years, or was it reduced a bit, or was it increased? So
we've been pretty stable at about 3 to 4 engineers for a long time. One thing that I think is nice about our team is that we've had very long tenure. I think the engineers on our team have tended to stay like 4, 5, 6 years. And that is great to have that kind of continuity of product understanding. And I'm going to chalk it up to just Clojure being fun to program in.
That's also a very common thing to Clojure projects, because we have people that work 10 years in our company, and that's only Clojure engineers.
Yeah.
And to stay for so long. I don't know how it's connected. Maybe that's because of fun you mentioned. So it's a pleasure to work with it.
Yeah. Okay. Daily joy.
Yeah.
And you partially answered this question, but I wanted to ask, even so, not like every month you have a new engineer who is onboarded into the team. However, when you do have new engineers, can you please tell us, how do you normally handle this process when you bring new person to the team, especially maybe without the Clojure experience before? Like, how do you ensure the onboarding goes smooth, and you try maybe to ramp up the process a bit? How does it work?
So to be honest, the Clojure part, I don't even think is the hard part of the onboarding. The rest of like the search system is much more complicated, and thinking in search is, I think, a lot harder to get people into. For Clojure, it's usually like how to set up your editor, some tutorials, one of the great many books that are around to like understand it. There's also the Clojure course, Eric Norman's Clojure course. I've had good success using that to onboard beginning Clojure engineers. And then, we spend time, the things that are hard for people to transition to in Clojure, I think, are like the functional aspect, the immutable aspect, and then the REPL driven development. And so I always make sure to spend a lot of time on that. Like, here's how our code base works. Here's how you can edit the functions on the fly to change the behavior. You don't have to like tear it down and compile it and run it. It's a living entity that you can modify. And I think once that breakthrough is made, like people understand that part of Clojure, they start to move a lot faster. And I think that's a lot where the fun comes in, because you can really, it's just fun to edit the running system. And when you're doing your tickets, it's so much faster.
Have you connected to production using REPL?
No.
Nope.
No.
That's also fun.
Yeah, we can deploy so quickly that there isn't like a huge benefit for that.
I see. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, and we might get like a call from our security team doing that.
Yeah, and just to complete this topic about the team, you mentioned that it's been kind of a challenge to find Clojure engineers.
Well,
not at all.
I guess let me say this: we typically don't find Clojure engineers, and because I don't think that's not the hard part. I don't think that's like I don't typically look for Clojure experience. I think finding someone who's interested is good, and then finding someone, we're looking more often for like the kind of search background, because I think that's the much harder aspect.
Yeah, I'm curious if we finish on the topic about the team. Have you compared the size of your team to neighborhood teams? So I heard the stories when one Erlang guy can overperform a team of 20 Java engineers and just drink coffee and do some relaxing stuff.
Yeah, it's hard to say, because like teams have such different portfolios. I think we do have a pretty small team, especially relative to the services we maintain, and their impact on like the functionality of the company.
I see. So talk more about the architecture, complexity, and technical usage of the Clojure. And I'm curious, what strategies help your team keep code base clarity, especially with the Clojure power and expressiveness? And the question why I'm asking this, because I've seen some projects, not every project in Clojure like this, but some projects used to overuse some macroses, domain-specific languages. So not building the product, but building DSL to build the product in this DSL. So I'm curious about, do you have some problems with this part of a Clojure?
Well, I'm happy to say our code base is pretty boring. We just have functional components that are instantiated and run. I think, but keeping that clean over the long term does require discipline. It is pretty easy. Clojure is so malleable that you can inject anything anywhere almost. So I think there's the garden tending aspect to it, where you should always kind of be incrementally improving the code base in between major tickets. So I think those things are definitely what helps us keep it tidy and organized. We don't use a ton of macros. Still pretty boring in the code base there. Just can get by with functions almost all the time. However, we do have a DSL for doing some query rewriting. So I guess that aspect is a macro, but it's very targeted for transforming like a user search query into a different search query to better express their own search intent. And so we use that to put in like New York Times specific kind of search domain rules, where someone types something and we want it to mean something else to match like the intent of the query, but when there isn't necessarily like the string has no reason to match that result particularly.
I see. Very interesting. And is this DSL large in terms of lines of code?
No, not really. And it that one is open source. It's a wrapper around another. So we've repurposed this like query rewriter plugin for Elasticsearch into a client-side query rewriter. So yeah, that exists now. If you're doing search and you want to rewrite queries today in Clojure, you can do that. We have that. It's open source.
So if we want to generalize your answer, you haven't met with any over-engineering or anything like overusing the Clojure power and systems that lead to problems. Am I right?
Yeah, I think that's right. We've been pretty tame in our usage.
Yeah, and another technical topic that I'm really curious about is the performance side of the Clojure, because I can imagine the volume of the traffic for the New York Times, the search especially, it's pretty heavy on the load, because we need to scan a lot of indexes, extract documents, do preparations, all these things. So tell your experience basically about the performance, how Clojure perform in this environment.
So Clojure is very performant. And hasn't been a struggle to scale. We have like, there's two parts of our workload that can be challenging, and it's like the bulk data ingestion. So that can be kind of heavy. Lots of documents in memory. We're like consuming from Kafka as fast as possible. So we'll have like 10,000 documents a second flowing through. That, as you can imagine, consumes a lot of memory. So like that's where we had to tune some like sizing there. We just want to hold as big a payload in memory as possible, so we can index as fast as possible. On the API side, almost so much of the work is happening in Elasticsearch. So the API is pretty thin. There's like the query writing, extracting entities from the query, injecting all that stuff to make a richer query. But then once we've done that, we kind of hand it off to the database, and it does all the heavy work. So scaling has been pretty easy. We run 3 nodes in Kubernetes, or like we have a 3-node deployment, or 3 replica deployment rather. They're each, kind of big, like 6 or 8 gigs of RAM, for those. But that's more than enough. And we have that in 2 regions. So, there's an active, 2 3-node, replica sets, deployed. And that's been enough. I mean, that takes us through elections. So, we've like got it down to a science now.
And are you using native Clojure data structures for this kind of tasks, or using some maybe custom Java built specific data structures for handling documents? Because from my experience, sometimes I see that people tend to not to use persistent data structures because they have penalty on the performance, the size, the memory, and they use some maybe mutable Java-based, JavaScript-based structures.
We do use all the immutable kind of default Clojure data structures. It has that has been fine. But we kind of do write our final document in one pass, more or less. So I think we're not doing tons of transformation of, writing and editing that same map over and over. The query rewriter does use its own mutable data structure under the hood. It's like it's 3 trees, the TRIES one. I don't know. However you want to say it.
And I have a question. The question is about the Clojure in the company as a matter of, question of existence. Basically, we've seen a lot when Clojure sometimes faces pushbacks. Not only in the large companies, but also in the small companies. Due to various reasons, it can be hiring, can be maintenance, or can be, just a strategic direction. So someone just goes from the top and tells, what are you doing? Why Clojure? Why not JavaScript? Let's rewrite. Have you encountered maybe any such moments in NYT?
Not really. Not in terms of the let's rewrite it. Sometimes, when a new executive joins, there might be some curiosity about why, but it's never gone past like the interest or the kind of question of, similar, like what made you choose this? I think whenever we've explained our rationale, it's been pretty well received. But I think the things I like to focus on are the practicality, the living on the JVM, the code that will work in 10 years, unchanged aspects of Clojure. I think those are the real superpowers for enterprise programmers.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, definitely. So just to summarize, there haven't been any serious discussions about it. So just a curiosity from the top, yes?
Yeah, just curiosity. I think that kind of migration would be so much effort, that, you could actually spend all that time improving the product. So I don't know if the investment would be worth it.
Cool. Yeah, definitely. Just wondering, because we've seen such cases when a really big chunk of the system just been rewritten in another language, not because of some technical reasons or some real factors or objectives, just because someone tells, okay, it's not the mainstream, we don't need it, we don't want it.
Yep.
So I'm glad it's not the case at NYT. It's really great.
And I wonder if the kind of AI assisted programming will change that argument for people, or that kind of feeling for people where you can still be productive in whatever language, learn it with the assistance.
From my personal experience, even in the era of AI assistants, agents, and everything else, Clojure still give the biggest performance boost for me, especially for backend tasks.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, are your team the single Clojure team in the New York Times? Because as I understand, in overall you have 600 plus engineers in a company. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's not 600 engineers. It's 600 in the tech org. So that includes all product management, program management, engineering, data, those people as well. Yeah, there are other teams that use Clojure. So we also build tooling and frameworks for building search systems at the company, and other teams that have search products like cooking or the audio apps. They have their own custom searches that are tuned to their vertical. Those use the libraries that we build. So their backends, their search backends are all Clojure as well.
Interesting. Because the next question I'm going to ask is about team collaboration. And how do you collaborate with other teams? Did you have some problems? Because as I understand, this library is written in Clojure itself. Do you provide just compiled jar files to them and just say you can take it, or it's some other collaboration?
The way those collaborations work, I think they're more consultant based, and that's not for the Clojure part, but is for the search part, because I think the search part is the harder part, and the harder part to wrap your head around mentally. How do we transform our data into a series of signals that can be matched against user queries? So helping when teams first start building their search with us, we sit down and talk about what are the important signals in your domain, user interactions, things like that we could pull out. And we help them build that system. So there is kind of a long onboarding and co-creation process of these search systems. But the teams that have done this, they have been able to iterate on their own, and they're pushing the boundaries of their they're adding more Clojure stuff, and it just making more and more complicated or sophisticated business logic for their search system. So they've been able to pick it up very well.
Cool. Do you have some kind of documentation, tutorial, onboarding, or it's just face-to-face conversations? Yeah.
Yeah. We have the tutorials on running Clojure projects, how to connect your editor to it, and then different demos for the examples of the technology we use. So we use Pedestal a lot for our that's the main server set, server libraries we use. So we have documentation on how to or what interceptors are, how to think about that kind of stuff, how they compose. And then similarly we have a lot of internal libraries that are specific for building search systems. And those also have, you need a lot of documentation.
Yeah, that's cool. Because in startups, documentation and passing the knowledge is usually a big problem.
Yeah.
And okay, and to summarize all the previous conversation that we had about the Clojure, and if you were tasked about building a new system today at the New York Times, would Clojure still be your first choice?
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah. I couldn't dream of doing it in anything else different.
And I was wondering, from your perspective, is the current Clojure ecosystem as of 2025 strong enough to support new product development at a company like NYT. So, for instance, I don't know, Google or maybe Amazon, should they be worried about picking up Clojure, or it's good enough to use it?
I think it's great to use. I mean, I think we have that advantage that there's always a great Java library for anything, from any cloud provider, any random open source thing you need to touch. There's some Java library there for you that you can lean on. I think one area where things are a little weaker probably is the natural language processing part. The Java NLP feels kind of old school. Is not very well. It's actually just hard to use, or it's not a business friendly license, so not something that we can use at the company. It is like hard to compete with like the Python NLP ecosystem there. There's just so much in general, like data science stuff. So that's where, I would love to see more stuff there. And I guess that's really, I need to start making that for myself, I guess, to put out there.
One of the goals of this podcast series is to show people that don't use Clojure in their production environment that it's not so scary and that it's manageable. And the next question is, can you say something to the engineer leaders in large organizations who are considering Clojure, who are interested in it, maybe using for hobby projects, but want to try to use it in a production environment? And particularly when it comes to long-term maintainability, team scaling, and onboarding, and everything else.
Yeah, I guess, my first thought is just do it. I think if you take the plunge, you'll see it's worth it. I find Clojure very easy to deploy. I mean, especially in the world of like deploying Docker images. But JVM deployments are pretty simple, especially we're not doing like wars or anything. It's just a simple jar, Java jar, run your thing, and then you're good to go. And especially with the more recent versions of the JVM, like the Docker integration is better. I don't know. We don't get like paged very much. Like, I don't even want to say annually, because we've been able to like harden this system through so many elections. Those are the real Super Bowl moments for us. So we've gotten to the point. I think that's the nice thing about Clojure is you can build these systems that run well, they run stably. The ecosystem isn't going to move underneath you. So next time you want to make a change, it's not going to be like getting back into a node project where you're apparently 15 versions behind and, nothing compiles anymore. We have some Clojure code that like, I haven't touched for half a decade. I go and have to make an update and great, works. It's older. It's using Leiningen, where most of our other stuff has moved on to depths, but like works great. Like, not going to touch it. Just going to do the update, deploy, and move on with my life.
Yeah, it's not abandoned. It's complete. It's finished.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, and we are at the moment of the podcast where we normally have a topic that's called chain of questions. So previously we had a podcast with Cam Soul, who's a founding engineer and the chief architect at the company called Metabase. And he left an extensive question for the next guest. So it's passed on to you. And here is quote. So the question is, where would you like to see Clojure and the Clojure community in the next few years? So if you would imagine that you have a time machine and like you took it for 1, 3, maybe 5 years in the future, what would you hope to see? So what should change in Clojure and Clojure community, and what should remain the same? In your opinion, in your like imagination, How do you see this?
So in the like core Clojure, I don't feel like a lot needs to change. I like it how it is. There are of course the issues that crop up, I think, with newer engineers about stack traces and stuff. But I have fully internalized that, so it's fine for me. I think purely selfishly, I would love to see, robust NLP libraries for Clojure, and in Clojure, not wrapping Java things. Ideally, like just like that data model from the ground up, the Clojure model. Better ways to do, vector and tensor stuff where, it's still a little like hard and there are a dozen competing libraries in Clojure. I know there's like work towards that ongoing. So I hope that continues and is successful. And in 3 to 5 years, there is a compelling ecosystem that can take a bite out of like the Python data science ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Do you think it's really a possible way? Because Python is not written libraries because it's just using the C version of libraries, the FFI. Do you think we will achieve at some day this kind of
the performance?
Yeah.
Well, there's the Panama, Project Panama stuff in JVM. I think the improving. So this is where it's going to get like the real tortured low level Java Clojure of like writing FFI code and other very low level things. But I think it's worth it to me, at least, as someone who does this to be able to consume that would be great. And I think it would be, I imagine it's possible. And I think easier to maintain and deploy. I mean, that's still is such a nightmare with any of the Python stuff we ever do.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
Another question I have is about how have you envisioned and imagined this podcast? Because coming on this podcast, you maybe had some topic in mind that you wanted to discuss, or maybe some questions that you wanted to answer, but we haven't asked. So what questions we should have asked you, but haven't? Maybe you have something in mind.
Yeah, I think you guys asked me just about everything, relevant to Clojure at my job. I think you about covered everything.
Thank you. Pleasure to hear.
Just glad to hear you.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we can finish because we are done with the questions. So Jeremiah, thank you. It's been a pleasure to talk to you today and hear your answers and hear your experience and all this, technical and management insights, how it really works in large organizations. So thank you for sharing. That was really insightful.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremiah. And also a big thanks to the audience. Subscribe to New York Times. They use Clojure.
Yeah.
Support Clojure.
Yeah, and once again, thank you, Jeremiah, and thank you to our listeners, of course. And see you next time. Bye.
Until next time.